Hello, welcome to our online Bible study. I hope that you'll take time to stay with us throughout this video, and I believe that you will be encouraged by the word of the Lord. If you're watching this on YouTube, why don't you hit that subscribe button or share button? And if you're watching this via Facebook, why don't you like it, share it? You can even leave a comment, a question, or submit a prayer request. Recently here in North Carolina, especially in Buncombe County, we've seen an increase in COVID-19 cases, the new Delta variant. We've actually had several people at the church come down with the virus, and so we have suspended in-person services for the past about 13, 14 days. And we did that to kind of slow the spread. And so we're doing this online Bible study, and we are glad that you joined us. We're praying for all those who are sick and affected by this virus. So thanks for watching. Let's get right to it. Again, if you're watching this via YouTube, hey, subscribe to the channel, share it, leave a comment. We'd love to hear from you. And so thanks for watching. John chapter 10, beginning in verse 7. Jesus said to them, "Most assuredly, I say to you, I am the door of the sheep." He goes on to say, Jesus speaking, "All who ever came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not hear them. I am the door, and if anyone enters by me, he will be saved." That's good news today. But Jesus also inserts in there, verse 10, "The thief cometh not except to kill, steal, and destroy." Jesus said, "I've come to give life and give it more abundantly." And Jesus then makes this profound statement in verse 11 of John chapter 10. Jesus said, "I am the good shepherd." The text here tells us, Jesus talking, that he's the good shepherd. Did you know the writer of Hebrews tells us Jesus is the great shepherd? David said it best in Psalms 23. If you've served the Lord for any amount of time, surely you know what Psalms 23 says. David writes so beautifully, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake." David goes on to write, "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil." Why? For you art with me. Your rod and staff, they comfort me. David continues writing and he says, "You, O Lord, because you're my shepherd, you prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever." The question today is the Lord your shepherd? People can be divided into two groups, either sheep or wolves. The truth of the matter is we all need a shepherd. Isaiah 53:6 tells us, "All we like sheep have gone astray. We've turned every one to our own way." I can testify in my own life that I've gone astray before. I've turned and did what I wanted to do. You know, we don't like to admit it, but we're all like sheep. Sheep need someone to follow. And Jesus is the one to follow. Why? Because he's the great shepherd. What makes Jesus the great shepherd? And how could David write about the Lord being his shepherd? Well, that's very easy because David was a shepherd himself. David knew what it was like to tend to sheep, to look after them, to lead them. You know, every man has that same job. Every husband has that job. Anyone that has a family or children, mothers, has that same job. We are called to lead people. I want us to take a moment during this video to look at why Jesus is and forever will be the great shepherd we need to follow. Well, a good shepherd lives with his sheep. He doesn't live far off or disconnected or out of reach. You'll always find the good shepherd with his flock. even if it means he misses out on other things. See, the flock is valuable to the shepherd. They are his life, so he lives with them. A good shepherd, because he lives with the sheep, he knows the sheep, he understands them. Jesus not only lived here and walked among us for 33 years, he was bruised, he suffered and was tempted like we are, but he is with us today, living in the hearts of those who believe in, trust him, and have accepted him and have acknowledged him as Lord and Savior. Jesus is closer than you think. At the mention of his name, he's not far off. Jesus never sleeps. He never takes a break. He never goes on vacation. He never gets tired. He never gets weary. But at the mention of his name, I'm glad that Jesus is with us, living among us in our heart and in and through his Spirit. He is here right now. That's what makes him the good shepherd. A good shepherd who lives with his flock is a saving shepherd. The Bible tells us Jesus is Lord over the Sabbath. In Bible times, there were strict laws about the Sabbath, how far people could walk. No work could be done, no cooking, no cleaning, no farming. It was a day to worship God, a day of rest. But they had one law on that day, the Sabbath day, that if a shepherd had a sheep to escape the fold, and if a sheep had strayed or wandered off, that shepherd could do whatever was necessary, even on the Sabbath. He could travel any distance to rescue his own sheep. Because another law stated that a landowner could dig pits, and if a sheep fell into it after a certain number of hours, that sheep became the landowner's possession. So even on the Sabbath, Jesus would go after that sheep. Why? Because he's a good shepherd. He sees the value in every single sheep, so much he's willing to seek and save that one that is lost. Jesus said a good shepherd would leave the 99 and go after that one lost sheep. But a hireling, an evil shepherd, they wouldn't be concerned over just one lost sheep. Nor does a hireling live with his flock. We have a great shepherd who came looking for you and I. Yet while we were sinners, he died for us. And he brought us up out of the miry clay. He set our feet on the rock to save. He brought us up out of the pit to redeem us, save us. Jesus is the great shepherd because he is a saving shepherd. Understand, if they are good shepherds, then there's bad shepherds. The Bible calls them hirelings. You know how to tell if a shepherd is evil? They only look out for themselves. They're always trying to drive, force, beat, demand the sheep. But a good shepherd leads. He goes before his flock, showing them the way. You know, in Bible times, between Jericho and Israel, there's an actual place called the Valley of the Shadow of Death. It was a deep, dark, rocky, narrow passage, great cliffs and drop-off between two mountains. It looked like it was impassable. Not impossible, but no way you could pass by it because it was dangerous. It looked hopeless. But a good shepherd would lead the sheep. He would risk his life first, leading them, guiding them on the way to green pasture land. A good shepherd would go before. The valley of death, by example, God is looking for some people who will say, will you lead? I'll follow. Jesus, the great shepherd, came and showed us how to live. He showed us by example, by his love, by his compassion. We have a great shepherd who is leading us. He will lead us through the valley of the shadow of death when life gets difficult, dark, lonely, discouraging, frightening. Jesus is there not to drive us, beat us, but he's simply there saying, come and follow me. Jesus is not going to force anyone to follow him. He will not at this time force anyone to worship or to do right. He simply wants folks to follow him, trust him, yield him. Why is he the good shepherd? Well, because he leads us through the valley of the shadow of death. And a good shepherd prepares a table before us in the presence of our enemies. See, after a shepherd has led his sheep through the valley of the shadow of death, that actual place between Jericho and Israel, there was along the way an area of flat rocks called the tableland. And along these great flat rocks, there was much grass in the cool shade, moisture for water. But the problem with this area was it was full of snakes and wolves, predators. The enemy hid there. So a good shepherd, as David was, as he writes about the Lord, a good shepherd would lead his sheep, and he would enter that flat land first, and he would take his staff and beat down every inch of the grassy area. He would drive away the snakes and the wolves. Why? Because he knew the flock would be tired and weary. And he would do that so that the sheep could lay down and rest and eat in safety. Did you know that's what the Good Shepherd Jesus did on the cross? Jesus beat down, whipped, and defeated and drove out the enemy of our soul. Jesus cleared an area at the foot of the cross so his own would be safe to live, eat, rest in peace. Just like this moment, God has prepared a meal for you and I. He prepared his word so we could be full, refreshed, revived, and we could receive it in peace. Because Jesus is the good shepherd, he has defeated the enemy of our soul. And we can say no weapon formed against us shall prosper. That's why the Bible tells us submit to God, resist the devil, and he will flee. We have a great shepherd who knows how to drive the enemy out of our lives only when we follow him, when we heed and obey him. Hebrews 5:9 tells us, and having been perfected, he became the author of eternal salvation to all who obey him. We need a shepherd. We need the Lord. And the Lord is the good shepherd who lives among us, goes before us, he leads us, he drives out the enemy, and he prepares a table before us. But we also need Jesus because a good shepherd keeps his flock together. You know, the world is so divided today. In fact, the division has came into the church, into the family of God. I see Christians argue about so many things, and it's become so divisive. That's another reason that we need Jesus, the good shepherd. See, an evil shepherd, a hireling, divides, but a good shepherd unites. I've heard many times in ministry that a church or congregation or even a class, that if it's built around a man, it will fail. And if you put the wrong man in office, damage can occur. But when Jesus is the center, he will bring everything together. How does a good shepherd keep the flock together? By letting him know he is there. See, sheep, let's be honest, if you've studied about sheep, they don't hear well. They don't see well, even in daylight. Sheep actually have very, very poor eyesight. Their hearing is not very good. They're frightened very easy. So when the flock was tired and weary, and even the shepherd was tired from leading them, as David became many times, the shepherd would take his staff and he would stick it in the ground in the middle of his flock, and then put his outer coat on the staff. And then the shepherd, as David did many times, he would climb up a knoll and watch the sheep. And the sheep, not seeing real well, thought the shepherd was right there. They felt secure. They stayed together because the sheep felt, saw, and smelled the presence of the shepherd, even though the shepherd might not actually be there, but he was watching over them from a hillside. Right now, it may seem like Jesus is far away, but he knows, he sees, he hears, and he left his presence here with us. He said, I'll never leave you or forsake you. He said, I won't leave you comfortless. He said, in fact, I will send you a helper, the Holy Ghost. Sometimes the sheep would become very nervous, afraid, and move towards that staff and coat to see if it really was the shepherd. Did you know a good shepherd names all of his sheep? And he would see that sheep moving towards the coat and staff in the middle of the flock as he watched from the hillside, and a good shepherd would call out that sheep's name. I want to encourage you today that Jesus knows your name. He knows who you are. He knows where you are. That's what Jesus does. He whispers your name, calling out your name. Jesus said, "My sheep know my voice, and another they will not hearken." A good shepherd keeps his flock together by his presence. See, where the presence of the Lord is, people will stay, wolves will leave. When someone hinders the presence of the Lord, sheep scatter, the wolves multiply. A good shepherd keeps the flock together by protecting them. After the flock is grazed and returned back home, the shepherd brings them back to the fold. You know what the fold represents? The house of God. And being the good shepherd that he is, well, just like David as the shepherd, God as the good shepherd, a good shepherd will handle and touch every single one of his sheep. At the end of the day, when the shepherd has brought the sheep back into the fold, one at a time, he will search each one of them for wounds, thorns, cuts, and if he finds any, he has a vat of oil, and he will apply oil to the wounds. He will give them fresh water to drink. He will even pour extra in their coat of their wool, so if they get thirsty during the night, they have something to drink. That's what Jesus does. Many today have abandoned the house of God. Many have not been able to come to the house because of COVID. And, well, it causes issues because it causes the flock not to be together, because Jesus desires us to come to the fold. Why? Because there he can heal the brokenhearted. He can bind our wounds. He can heal our bodies. He can forgive our iniquities. He washes us and cleanses us by his word. Then the shepherd will go out in front of the sheep gate, build a fire. This is what David did, and he can write so eloquently about the Lord being the good shepherd. But there, David, each night, he would build a fire to keep the sheep warm, to keep the wolves away, because wolves don't like fire. Once the shepherd has built a fire, do you know what the shepherd did? See, there was only one entrance into the fold. And after the shepherd had brought all the sheep back into the fold and handled and touched and anointed and cleansed and bathed and soothed them, well, the shepherd would go and lay himself down inside the sheep gate. There he laid across the gate. He was willing to give his own life for the sheep. I'm glad the good shepherd, Jesus, built a fire. He started that fire on the day of Pentecost, and it still burns bright today. That fire protects, directs, warms, melts hearts, and it turns away the wolves. And Jesus right now is standing between us and the enemy. He is the great shepherd who, just like David knew from experience, Jesus is the good shepherd because he lives among us. He loves us and leads us. He drives out the enemy. He prepares a table before us. He keeps us together. He handles us with care. He's built a fire that will keep us warm. He's drove away the wolves. And Jesus is standing between us and the enemy. So really the question is the Lord your shepherd? Hey, thanks for watching. Drop a comment, a prayer request, subscribe, share, like. We'd love to hear from you. We're hoping to soon open the doors again of the church here. We'd love to see you. God bless you. Have a wonderful day. And remember, the Lord wants to be your shepherd. We all need one.